We are recording. And here come the admissions. I'm going to go ahead and admit all. And we're going to have to manage this a little bit. I'm going to keep her on gallery for now. We'll go speaker view when we can. We are streaming. Привет, Rossiyskaya. Свет работает. Here we go. Hello, everybody. My name is Eric Johnson, and I'm here with my baby brother, Derek Johnson, and our good friend, Eric Garland. Hi, guys.
Greetings.
Greetings, gentlemen.
All right. So we are here for the second incarnation of the Running into the Fog live stream, close the distance format. And just as a reminder, everybody, as they're coming in here, Derek, you are a co-host. So if you see people show up in the waiting room, feel free to just let them in at will. We'll see if we can't break the server here in the process of doing this. But we are here to talk about what's going on in our macro environment once again. And Eric, you were so gracious as to help me to figure out how to do some of this topic definition and some of this format. I'll remind our listeners that the format here is the first 30 minutes is a social live stream entitled Unthinkable. We are going to think the unthinkable during this first 30 minutes. Second 30 minutes is the unspeakable when we cut the social stream. So all those of you watching on YouTube right now, you'll have to catch up later. But by next Tuesday, when we do this again, you'll have a QR code that you can scan, which will then enable you to register and stay on the meeting so you don't get kicked off when we cut the social stream. And eventually there will be a third segment to this, a third half hour, which I'm tentatively calling Unbelievable, which will happen in virtual reality. But we need some virtual reality headset users to join into this meeting in the weeks before we launch that next phase. So I'd like to begin by asking, Eric, give us a quick 30-second overview of who you are, what you do, how we know you.
Eric Garland, strategic analyst for corporations and governments for 25 years. Yeah, that's about it. I tell you things before they happen, or I explain things as they're happening, which we saw coming, which is what we'll be doing today.
Awesome. I just noticed that I had to change the setting for allowing our audience to unmute and show their video during this meeting. Otherwise, we might get Zoom bombed. So I took care of that. Derek. Quick intro on you, Derek.
You want to know how you know me?
Yeah, how do I know you? And what's the deal with the sweet jean jacket?
These sweet jean jackets, man. So we introduced these jean jackets last time, 2 weeks ago. And you know, Eric, I'm sure you're going to flash the picture of us as maybe 4 and 8 year olds. You know, we're a little over 4 years apart to our audience, and we came across this really cool picture of us in these dope jean jackets from like 1978 or thereabouts, and we thought we'd maybe make that the official outerwear of Running into the Fog live stream here. So I think it's a reasonable idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
Best idea we ever had, but I think it's a pretty cute picture way back then, and I think it could create a pretty cool series of pictures nowadays. So Running into the Fog, you know, it's been a great pleasure to put this series together with you, Eric, over the last year or so. And you know, while we're transforming and kind of rolling through a few alterations to this schedule, you know, what I think is neat is Eric Garland, your episode Running into the Fog, the long form version of it went live last week, and I know I re-listened to it, even though I was there in person for the recording a few months back, and took a lot away from it the second time through. You know, especially around humility as an analyst. Everybody needs a healthy dose of that from time to time, and just the thought processes required to be a good analyst. So would love to go a little bit deeper on that topic today.
Well, first of all, I'd like to just say I totally dig the sweet 77 styly there, because we're today we're talking about revisiting the Cold War, which apparently, spoiler alert, never went away. So
Well, that's
Get out the pumpkin orange couch and the everything old is very much. It's not even new. It's just present. There's no such thing as the past. The past isn't dead. It isn't even past.
I wish I had a collared polo shirt and my jean jacket handy, but I will find my jean jacket before the next show, Derek. I did a quick flurry around the house and I could not find it. So I won't say that I took it off 2 weeks ago and lost it, but Tina's been searching around my wife has been trying to find some stuff around here lately, and I think it's at the bottom of the pile. So forgive me. I'm out of uniform for that. But as Derek said, this is about how old are you here, Derek? About 4?
Probably about 4 there. Yep.
Cool. So I'm 4 years older. I'm about 7.5 or 8, something like that in that photo. But Eric gets us started. And by the way, this first half called Unthinkable. Let's think a little bit about the unthinkable. I would say that a few years ago, it was sort of unthinkable that we'd be here confronting a potential invasion of Europe by Russia. And, I won't say that that's going to happen, but it's a quick right-hand turn from Kiev to the Baltics, excuse me. That's a big geopolitical error, to the Baltics, and even Poland is kind of straight ahead. So I don't know if that'll happen, obviously. And I would say that escalation of rhetoric like that is probably irresponsible by world leaders, but I'm no world leader. So any thoughts?
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Yeah, the unthinkable. It's kind of funny. I remember, about you guys remember, was it 6 years ago or so? I'm like, hey, this Russia's still doing stuff, and they're like, Russia's doing stuff. What are you talking about? You're crazy. So this is a good thing to put in unthinkable. It's like now we have to go beyond that. Like, well, of course, Russia's invading Ukraine, which is part of its geopolitical. Goals, and of course disrupting NATO, which, when I said so on Twitter like 6 years ago after the election, everybody freaked out when it's like, have you met Russia? That's what they do. They cause chaos. They don't like NATO. It's Russia. Also vodka, pickles, pretty good at hockey. I mean, these are not slurs. This is just Russia, Chinese people. There's lots of them. Their Confucian structure of society, not slurs. Describe Americans crappy at history, myopic, generally a teenager's view of history. That's us, from my perspective, pretty objective. But anyways, so this has been boiling up for a long time. You could say since 2016, when we started really looking at Russia's intelligence services and their influence on politics. In key NATO allies, particularly their elections or Brexit, the referendum on the UK breaking a whole ton of their treaties and agreements that would, of course, mess up not just, we're free from something, but also, the agreements that would allow pharmaceutical companies to be placed certain, places, the use of certain military facilities, like I think some that involved maybe submarines, or was that Scottish independence that they had at risk, deep water ports that could have nuclear subs. That Russia was also trying to, juice up Scottish independence. Anyhow, we've gone. You could call it 2016 when we started really looking at that, or you could look at 2014 when they invaded and took over Crimea and Luhansk and Donetsk. Or hell, you could go back 100 years. You could go back to the Communist Revolution, or you could go back to post-World War II, the Berlin Airlift. Wherever you want to start. Russia is an empire. Big old empire. Nothing wrong with that. There are plenty of them around. English, French, Spanish at one point, but so the Russians had one. And it's still kind of stuck around, and they've had some very interesting changes to that empire, as I've said, post fall of the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was really replaced by a merger between intelligence services, organized crime, and the state, which was brand new alloy. It was as important to warfare around the world as the introduction of steel was. The notion of making metal into weapons had been around a long time, but that particular alloy totally caught people off guard if one had it and one didn't. So that's what was up. So we had a new alloy post 2000, especially with the ascendance of Vladimir Putin to become head of state, and so we've been dealing with a resurgent Russia, which some analysts saw and some did not as well. Just kind of keep everyone up to date as to what's going on. There's been threats of sanctions for a variety of things. There's been sanctions that have gone up against Russian oligarchs and the Russian intelligence services for many years, and this includes, and when I say sanctions, I mean U.S. sanctions, because we have the ones that got teeth in them for one simple strategic reason. It's simple, but it's very powerful. You can only buy and sell petroleum in U.S. dollars. There are all the big powers, who are adversarial to the United States would love to replace that, which is why there's so much interest in cryptocurrencies and other ways to break the dollar hegemony. But we ain't there yet, so the only way you can buy and sell petroleum, if you like that kind of thing, is the U.S. greenback. And so that's why our Treasury has sanctions that got teeth in them. So, the question is, when does the U.S. sanction Russia or other players or other, stakeholders around the world? And we started that in earnest in 2014, and that's sort of increased 2014 to 16, and then throughout throughout Trump. That despite people's people's thoughts about how Trump reacted, the Treasury Office of Foreign Asset Control made moves that weren't quite consistent with Trump's fealty to Putin at press conferences. It was very interesting. That story, maybe there's a deep state or something, but we kept moving strategically to contain Vladimir Putin and Russia. That's of course accelerated from Joe Biden's election. And his administration's establishment onward. And now, since, we've been getting more and more intense in our rhetoric, and Russia kind of let us know that they'd be going in further into Ukraine after all. And now you kind of have this sort of thing where people, you ever get that thing where somebody has decided to start a fight in a bar and they've started to let out some epithets that, indicate some lack of manhood or alleges homosexuality as if it's a bad thing. That point in a bar fight when this thing has started and maybe somebody's, come here and pushes somebody else away, which is a bad understanding of the laws of physics. But, and now something's got to happen. Geopolitically that can happen, but especially in Russia where, every time you make a statement to the outside world as a head of state, you've got two audiences. You have the foreign audience, the external audience that's around you, possibly your allies, possibly your adversaries, maybe even your enemies. And then you have the internal, audience for that, your domestic audience that keeps you in place and decides not to shank you in the back like so many Roman emperors in the latter days of that empire. So it's hard to craft messages that work internally and externally. And one of the things I think everybody who's an analyst of Russia has to understand, or actually rather that real analysts of Russia understand, and that people who are merely looking inward, trying to figure out what's going on, looking at Russia, don't understand necessarily. They don't think like us. They don't think like Westerners. They think like Russians. They do not expect the world to be win-win. They expect there to be a winner and a loser. They'd rather they be the winners and not the losers. And screw you, pal. And that life is brutal and hard and unfair.
And short.
And, and so, sometimes short, be careful in certain jobs, avoid open window above 7th floor. It gets very, very difficult. Or my friend John Badlam, he calls it Russian defenestroma. It's a rare kind of cancer, Russian windows cancer.
Right.
Yeah.
So I have a question for you.
Okay.
But I have an unthinkable question, I think. And by the way, audience here I'm not watching the live stream chat, by the way, on YouTube. Not today anyway. We'll maybe start doing that next week. But in this chat here on the Zoom meeting, feel free to put your questions in chat. If you want to come on camera and unmute and actually ask a question out loud, we can do that. You have to promise your best behavior and no nudity and all that good stuff when we do that. However, because there's some of you I don't know out there, and don't know what you're capable of. But if you're willing to do that, raise your hand, and I'll try and get around to you so you can ask those questions in person here. One thing that struck me, and I was thinking of this as I was looking at, by the way, the new graphics, and I'd like to share this real quick. We are building NFTs for attendees to these meetings. And I just got the first set of graphics from my Web3 engineering team earlier today. So here is the Unthinkable token. If you attend the Unthinkable portion of the Close the Distance format, specifically running into the fog, you will earn this token. Eventually, but maybe next Tuesday, you'll just scan the QR code that we put up on the screen, and your public wallet will automatically redeem the token for that. You may see here that there is also an unspeakable token, which happens only for those people who are registered here. So for those of you on the bridge, you can earn both of these tokens and gain access to the running into the fog. You will, as a result of that, I hear some feedback, but that's okay. And more about that next week. But my question for you, Eric, is if we've been in a sort of debatably hegemonic, American unipolar world, does what Russia just did last night represent a multipolar fragmentation? And I'm sort of suggesting this as a geopolitical analyst. What's your take on that? Is this the second end of American hegemony, which sort of the first end of American hegemony was after Vietnam? We left the gold standard and all that good stuff in 1971. Are we there again here 50 years later and a little change?
Nope, we're in the same place we've been for a long time. Only it's been, sort of like, what was it? The news of my demise has been greatly exaggerated. The news of a monopolar world had been greatly exaggerated. There has been a multi or polypolar world the whole time. If anything's gotten more intense, it has been the role of covert operations. And, it's funny when, people say, might throw out as an epithet towards me, like, you're obsessed with Russian intelligence. It's like, why Russian? Two, why a formal intelligence service? That is a very amateur way to see the world. There are such things. There are people who are one-star generals at the GRU, the GRU, in Russia, the main military intelligence directorate. There's the SVR and the FSB, and I guess those are spies technically, and those are people that have a certain esprit de corps. But if that's the kind of folks you're looking for, just intelligence officers who are directing traffic, who are taught taught directly in Russian the methodologies of Russian espionage as it's developed over more than 100 years, then you're missing it, pal, because this whole thing is well beyond that. Because what happens if you have some 23-year-old woman from Denver who is trained in those arts and is an American citizen and has never lived anywhere else and doesn't speak Russian, but knows how to do that and was recruited some way and is doing the same things? Is that Russian intelligence, or is that Russian military science? And who's that applied for? Is that a corporation, a for-profit entity with some crazy billionaire? Is it a private company? Is it a public company? Are we talking about? Oh hell, let's go straight into it. Are we talking about the Israelis? Because Israelis are, man, they've always been Division I ball. They've always been in the Final Four. We're almost to March Madness. It's a good metaphor, I think. You got the Division I ball players. You got Duke, like Russia's Duke, right? France is North Carolina State. The Brits, etc. And Israel's Michigan State. They're right up there. They dunk all the time. So what about those guys? And when you consider the network, merge that with organized crime. And, talk about, then let's get into China and all of the money that they've put into places. And they're absolutely using that as a lever on things. Not only is it not been a monopolar world this whole time, since the quote fall of the Soviet Union, the definition of all these forms of compromise or their relationship to the United States, are more covert than overt. And what about the fact that you have people in the United States that have made deals, business deals, for example, with those foreign powers? Or maybe not the government directly, but the government indirectly, like a place like China. There's nothing that happens on a major scale industrially in China without the knowledge of the Chinese state. And for my friends who did business there, if you got above a certain dollar amount, you had a colonel or a 1-star general equivalent in the Chinese military assigned to you. Well, that's how I heard it described, above a certain level. I mean, because they view that as part of their national interest, and they're huge, and they have tons of our cash because of our industrial arrangements with them. And yeah, so at what point? Excuse me, at what point were we monopolar? And who's we? Who's we? Apple, that's still getting glass screens for iPhones and whatnot. And folks, it's not like I'm totally opposed to the iPhone or anything. I don't like the idea of slave labor going to anything. But do they represent the United States or China or themselves? What about the petroleum companies? Or do they represent the Saudis and the Russians right now, or themselves, or us? If there's no us and them in a lot of ways for everybody, then monopolar. I don't know. So is it just, how do you just define monopolar? Is that just the people who believe in, American, national interest first? Don't want to say America first, because that'll give you a 1930s vibe that you don't want. But nevertheless, I mean, is that how you define being fully American? Because most of the major players out there, especially in tech and major industry and energy, they have dealings with other countries around the world by definition. So this idea, I mean, that's the level of sophistication that we're working in right now. And we haven't even gotten into the role of organized crime in all of this.
So because you invoked NCAA basketball, I'm going to pass it to my brother, literally, here in the conversation for whatever he's got next. And, I'll also suggest that I think there's some barometers of influence in defining the polarities of power out there. And one of them is very strictly financial and economic. You cited the petrodollar as being really the defining characteristic of a hegemon. And if the dollar is no longer the global reserve currency, which some people have been speculating about for some time now, what happens from a multipolar power projection standpoint? But I said I'd toss it to Derek. So Derek, your ball.
He didn't really mean he was going to toss me the ball, but I loved, Mr. Garland, how you said Michigan State, they dunk. Like all these players, they dunk. I have a question for you, and I will admit to the audience, I am not able to hang. I have no hang time with these two guys, the two Erics, in terms of talking geopolitical anything. I'm a numbers guy and a people person, as I like to say. But here's the question. In the world of intelligence analysis, it's long been said that there's kind of three categories. Decisions and choices that are within your control, otherwise known as strategic options, strategic decisions. There's decisions and choices that are outside of your control, sometimes known as key players, that you need to profile and try to understand best you can. And then there's things that are in no one's control. Early warning indicators might be the other way of saying that. When you think about what's going on in Russia, and especially if you can show me somebody that can, with any degree of certainty, predict what Mr. Putin is actually going to do, that's the question for you. Is when you think about profiling key players, whether it be in this particular scenario around Russia, or in a competitive concern, or in your personal life. How do you as an intelligence analyst actually go about saying, I'm going to do something different that gives me a better outcome in the predictability meter of being able to say, this is with some high degree of certainty what this key player or choice that's way outside of my control, this is what's going to happen?
Great question. So right there, you're talking about the soul of strategic wargaming, or as I quipped one time on Twitter, game theory, which it's not game theory per se, though it has elements of Nash equilibrium. But you got to look at the strategic map there, and you got to look at actor analysis. And to do that effectively, and what they do at the Pentagon is they have 17 agencies that are constantly flowing information, finished intelligence products in, so that when people sit down at a very high level, say at the Pentagon, they are doing so with a briefing book in front of them that explains what the actors they're looking at, what they want, what are their assets, what are their liabilities, what are their desires, what are their fears, and then so you have your strategic map, what your assumptions are about the world and the game that we're all playing. Then you have the actors, what you assume to be true, which should be constantly updated, which is why, intelligence is never wasted as long as you document it and keep it and have a way culturally to continually improve the culture of decision-making in your organization. And then there's wild cards, thinking the unthinkable, saying the unspeakable, which that's our theme here. If you have those all together, you can sit down and do an intellectual exercise and document that in a strategic war game. And we all sell strategic wargaming services, right? I'm terrible at self-promotion, but I'm trying to get better at it. That's something you do so you don't get caught off guard. I think this what's about to happen is going to be a great advertisement for strategic simulations, because here's something that I assume, having looked at this for 25 years, that these moments of kinetic bam, of real things happening, stuff blowing up, physical events, especially where people die and stuff blows up, that makes the rest of everyone else's strategic plans, especially if they're not very well thought out, that puts them all in jeopardy and makes their plans a lot harder for them to understand, because chances are they didn't do the strategic work prior to their plan. Their plans usually aren't very robust, in my experience. They have a single official view of the future, and that's what they drive towards. Especially where you have the current geopolitical situation, you have multiple players who do not share the same values. They don't necessarily like each other, but they've aligned with each other. Like, for example, there's a lot of Russia, China, Saudi, and let's say global organized crime that have all aligned. They're not the same people. They may not like each other at all, but they may pool money and resources in a general, our fortunes are better. This is their actor analysis. Our fortunes are better if the FBI and DOJ in the United States do not exist, and we can't have our bank accounts shut off and be, extradited on a red notice. That's their desired outcome for this. They'd also like to break dollar hegemony and, wrest control away from the United States, which has, to this day, does have a monopolar type level of power differential between us and them. And even when that gets out of whack, like Turkey, Erdogan, the dictator there, he was giving us hell there for several years. And today, boy, he's talking back to his friend Putin very hard, going, no, actually, I don't agree with your Ukraine policy. Interesting. It's almost like he understands the differential, and maybe somebody diplomatically explained just the cost of what's coming. Who knows? I just know I'm just watching his behavior be different, Mr. Erdogan there. But these folks that work together, mob, Saudi, China, Russia, that generally are opposed to the United States stated values, most of their group projects, I don't think, are very well defined. Their interests are all very different for all the reasons of history and culture and whatnot. And I think putting any one of them to the test, like Vladimir Putin in Russia right now, I think promises a lot of instability. For example, I think Putin's back is to the wall. He, like I was saying before about giving a domestic speech at the same time you're giving a foreign speech. I mean, he's sold to his country that that he's moving forward, and boy, we're going to throw our weight around, because that's kind of what the Russian people expect. They want a strong leader who knows what doing that strength. Otherwise, they know instinctively somebody around him might shank him and be the next guy. There's a history of this, of course. But to the outside world, once he's kind of promised that, back in office hard, but it's really hard to his internal audience. And so they had a National Security Council type meeting on TV that was it was like an episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm. It was seriously weird. Did either of you guys see any of that? Eric, did you see it?
Nope.
I didn't either.
Russia's like head of intelligence services was stuttering, and Putin's like, "Speak clearly, man." And it was like, whoa, this is awkward. I mean, also, why the hell are you guys having like a Security Council meeting like in this giant weird, looks like it's from the set of Game of Thrones type thing with this white marble columns? Like, what? What do you do that? I mean, when did you guys? Have we ever seen a National Security Council meeting outside of like a snapped photo? Has the United States ever convened a National Security Council meeting on like Snapchat or some shit? I'm gonna take that as a no. You guys haven't seen? No. To the audience, have you ever seen? Has Britain done this? Has Canada's Canadian Armed Forces ever just throw up a live stream and like, what you doing? Painting our nails. So we're worried about Greece and Turkey. Okay, right, so that's some weird. So it just looked like it was Curb Your Enthusiasm there. So I think they're in a tough position here, because I don't think we're going to let them go all the way to East Berlin this time, like last time. I don't think that's going to happen.
Right on. So real quick change of format here for us. YouTube and those of you on social, farewell. If you'd like to join the meeting for the unspeakable portion of our conversation today, visit openrecon.com and you can sign up to join this in a more permanent way. But for those of you on YouTube who joined us, thank you very much. And we'll see you later.